about the budget hearings today. That's quite a transition. I'm grateful for your attention to this. I'm really impressed by the interest, the attention, the details in which you are engaging on the budget discussions, and I'm grateful for that. Last year brought us a lot of good news. Whenever you look at the fact that we had a growing economy and we had job creation in this state, in fact, in 2017, we had the lowest level of unemployment in the history of Arkansas, along with a record number of Arkansans that entered the workforce. And so wage rates are up, Medicaid enrollment is down, and SNAP benefits are the lowest in 9 years. Those are simply the facts of a growing and expanding economy that we benefit from. And so the $100 million tax cut that was enacted in 2015 is fully in place now. It has put more money in the consumer's pocket, and because consumer confidence is high, the extra money is in the stream of commerce and they're spending it. For the state, that means individual tax collections are up and sales tax collections are at a record high. And that leads me to the budget discussion for FY19. And I wanted to recognize Director Larry Walther, Budget Director Duncan Baird, and their team that's here with me that will go into the budget in detail. I also want to recognize my agency directors that have worked literally for months and months on the budget as we prepared it this year, and have been very helpful to really dig deep into each line item of the budget. Last year, my administration presented an FY19 budget that allocated $5.7 billion in general revenue needs. The budget I present today is different from that. The budget that I present today reflects real spending cuts in a number of agencies through efficiencies without a reduction in services. It shows a slower growth in Medicaid spending. It meets the requirement of education adequacy, increases the funding for public safety, and reduces our historic reliance on surpluses to fund ongoing budget needs. Those are some of the changes that you'll see in the budget that is being presented today. The result of all of these changes is a net reduction in overall spending in FY19 as compared to the budget I presented last year. The reduction amounts to a net savings of $64 million. Now let me outline the highlights. First, in the area of spending reductions, because again of a growing economy, the Education Adequacy Fund, which primarily is made up of the 7/8% sales tax, which has never been sufficient to fully fund adequacy, is now sufficient to meet the legislative mandate on education spending to achieve adequacy. And so the reliance upon general revenue transfer is not needed this year. This means $50 million that we plan to transfer from general revenue will not be required, and we will still be able to meet the adequacy requirements set by the legislature. Secondly, I've asked the Department of Education from an administrative standpoint and various other agencies to reduce the amount of general revenue transfers. We restored the Category B funding that we didn't, we cut last year. We restored that, but then I asked them to cut administrative overhead and look at other ways to minimize the general revenue transfers. These reductions will not impact the delivery of services, but will reflect improved efficiencies, and these spending reductions total approximately $3 million. When it comes to Medicaid spending, we have seen a reduction in the number of Arkansans on Medicaid by over 116,000 in the last year. This is not, and let me emphasize, this is not because we've reduced eligibility or we've reduced services. That's not happened. This is because of transformation efforts within DHS and because more people are working and increasing their income. So again, this is not a a severe tactic. It is simply good news as a result of a growing economy and improved transformation efforts within DHS. As a result, the budget reflects a reduction in spending of over $55 million compared to the FY19 budget outline presented a year ago. Now, I've asked to be presented on the video screen a chart, if you could refer to this, which shows the national health care expenditure projections according to CMS. The normal growth rate for Medicaid spending is 5.6%. And so our projected budget that we presented a year ago was a slightly less than that. It was 5.58%. Because of the transformation efforts and because of those that 116,000 moved off, the revised Medicaid forecast reflects a 2.1% growth in Medicaid spending. And so I think that is reflective of some very good work that our partners at DHS has done, and again, a growing economy. The second chart talks about the remaining growth at 2.17% that you see in Medicaid spending. I want to talk about that for a second. That remaining growth is the result of a change in the federal match rate, the elimination of $50 million in one-time funding for Medicaid, and normal cost increases. And so instead of having a $51 million transfer from general revenues, that's replaced with a budget line, part of the budget. And so that's reflected in terms of the growth. And then the Medicaid change because of the FMAP change. This is just simply reflective that our wage rate is going up, and so we're having to carry a little bit higher percent of our share of the Medicaid spending. That's $48.6 million. And then the other is because of the FMAP chip in Arkansas Works. And so that's $142 million increase in Medicaid spending, which is 2.17%. So that is a $55 million saving than what just simply general revenue transfer than what we expected a year ago. That also reflects what is it, $400 and some million in federal taxpayer savings as well. So let me emphasize a few other areas to note in the budget. There are some areas of spending increases. In the area of public safety, we've added $4 million for county jail reimbursement. When I became governor, we were behind. We had a low compensation rate. We've increased that, and we've got on schedule for reimbursing our counties for when they house state prisoners. But we want to make sure that it's fully funded, so we've increased that by $4 million based upon what we anticipate is a county jail backlog. Secondly, funding is in place for the improvement needed to reduce violence in prison. There's some of the budget for that's part of their normal prison operations, but I wanted to emphasize that that is in place. Thirdly, when it comes to community corrections, you'll see a $1.4 million increase to ensure continued progress with our reentry program and our parole supervision. The funding for the crisis stabilization units is in place. That you approved in the last session, that is in place, and it includes the added funding that I have presented from Rainy Day for an additional crisis stabilization unit. And so in other areas, there is funding in the budget for 65 new child welfare caseworkers. This continues the path of our major responsibility for the children of our state that are subject to abuse or in need of foster care, to make sure we have the caseworkers to respond. We continue to comply with the recommendations of the Paul Vincent report. When it comes to our Arkansas State Police and our public safety, we put $3 million for Arkansas State Police vehicles, which has, in my experience, been handled by surplus money that has been allocated there. We've made it a line item and part of the state police budget. And then you will see a $10 million to implement the higher education productivity funding model. I want to thank all of you for your support of that during the last session, creating that new emphasis upon student progression versus simply student enrollment, that holds our institutions more accountable for spending efficiencies and emphasizing affordability. Consistent with that, today I'm releasing a letter to the presidents and chancellors of the Arkansas four-year institutions. And this letter asks them to freeze in-state tuition rates in all four-year institutions next year. Over the last 10 years, the tuition increases have ranged from a low of 3% to a high of 6.2%. So it's time to give our students a break. It's time to help make college more affordable. And so I've asked our chancellors and presidents to freeze tuition rates for in-state residents next year. Now, I say that, please understand, this is not in a critical fashion in any way. Our four-year institutions, all of our higher education, have been very good partners with us in the productivity funding model, in improving efficiency. They recognize and have the same goal that we have of affordability for the students. But I believe that this request by the governor will increase the leverage our leadership has to control the cost and to improve efficiency and to make college more affordable. I've also asked the two-year colleges to limit their tuition increases to CPI. And I think those are reasonable and balanced requests for our higher education institutions. I've asked your support in a rhetorical way for that, even though it's not part of the budget. Your support for that effort is important. The net result is that we have reduced general revenue spending and created a projected surplus of $64 million. The goal is to create a surplus that will be a cushion for future economic changes, and they will come someday. But it will also be the foundation and sets the stage for future tax cuts and increasing the competitiveness of Arkansas tax rates. The budget allocates 75% of this surplus, $64 million, 75% of that, $48 million, is allocated to a new restricted reserve fund that can only be touched with concurrence of the legislative branch. The other 25%, $16 million, is allocated to another important need of our state, and that is for the Highway Transfer Fund, in accordance with the Highway Improvement Plan of 2016 that you passed. And so, according to my calculations, there's well over $20 million that's already set aside that will be flowing pursuant to the Highway Improvement Plan. This adds another $16 million under the budget surplus that's been created.